groovers, how are you going? Thank you very much for joining me tonight. Tonight, I want to talk about night photography. Yes, as you can see up there in the sky, out of focus, it's nighttime, and night photography presents its own set of challenges. There's the other D850 doing some stuff. So in this movie episode, because it's moving pictures, and movie means moving pictures, in this movie I'd like to give you 7 great tips on how to work at night, how to be efficient, how to get results. Let's talk. So, what are the most difficult things about night photography? Well, there's not a lot of light, and we all know that makes things a bit more difficult. It's harder to see, thus it's harder to focus. So focusing systems are stretched, and some of the older ones really don't work that well. You often need to carry a tripod, and that can make life a bit more difficult, carrying a tripod. And it can be more dangerous being out at night. But there's so much upside. Besides light, carrying things, and danger, there's so much upside. Let's talk about the upside for a little bit. So, why do I like night? Why do I like night photography so much? Well, the number one reason is the light. There isn't just one gigantic light source that's bouncing all over the place like there is during the day. There's hundreds, thousands, millions. There's kind of endless light sources when you're in a city like this. So this means it keeps changing, it keeps being different. And even more, my favorite thing to shoot than at night is at night in the rain. You get even more light sources. So that is so much fun. But obviously, shooting in the dark, shooting in the rain, that's about as hard as it gets, besides maybe being in a snowstorm or a sandstorm or being underwater. But you know what I mean. It's a difficult task. But I just love what nighttime does, and the fact that we have all these different light sources. It's an absolute joy. So, how do we make this stuff work? Glad you asked. Well, point number 1 about shooting at nighttime. It's dark. There are a number of different ways to mitigate darkness. One is a tripod and slow shutter speeds. Then you can do whatever you want with the other stuff, the ISO and the aperture and so on. 2, use all the other stuff. Use your aperture, your shutter and your ISO together to work at nighttime, so you can get away without a tripod. But that tends to be the more expensive option, because the equipment that allows you to shoot better in low light is more expensive. Point number 1 about shooting at nighttime: choose. Are you a tripod person, or are you use all the other stuff, aperture, shutter and ISO, to make it work? Because that's your first choice, because that's how you determine which gear you're going to work with. And tonight I'm working with the tripod, which you can see over there, and I'm also working handheld, so I'm doing both. That's point number 1. You're going to use the tripod, or you're going to use the aperture, shutter and ISO in conjunction. So tip number two is a really easy one. If you can, photograph in the rain, because I'll tell you why, there's like 10 times more light when you're shooting in the rain than when you're shooting without the rain. So just shooting in the rain is so beautiful, even so it's a lot harder. There's an umbrella over there, you might see, it's probably out of focus. It's totally the best thing. Number 2, it's raining again, in the rain. Do it. Tip number 3 is make sure you get a full frame camera which has good high ISO capabilities, and so many cameras do now. Obviously full frame sensors are better than crop sensors because the photo diodes are larger at the same megapixels, so that's just a reality. Bigger the pixels, the more light they capture, the better job they do. So tip number 3 is, if you want to crank up the ISOs to the 16s, the 32s, the 64s and beyond, I would strongly suggest full frame. Out here in the rain, but there is lots of wind and I just got some dust in my face. Tip number 4, if you've decided to go shutter, ISO, aperture, and aperture is going to be the thing that you lean on the most, then you need lenses with apertures of 2.8, 1.8, 1.4, 1, even 0.95 if you have a spare 10, 12 grand. Lenses from about 1.4 onwards, you can pretty much walk around in a city like this. You don't need a tripod. You can even have some reasonable shutter speeds, shoot handheld, and you've got the job done. The thing to keep in mind is, of course, if you've got a really big aperture, really low number, you have a really short depth of field. So be aware of what you're doing, be aware of what you want to focus on, and you need to nail that focus. So it also means you need a good nighttime focusing system. So think about that as well. So that's tip number 4, lenses with really big apertures, small numbers, big holes. You can do anything at night, just make sure your shutter speeds are reasonable and you've nailed your focus. Number 5, it's a kind of a boring one, but it's an important one, and that is play it safe. All cities have their exciting parts, their interesting parts, their photogenic parts. They also have their dangerous parts, and one of the things I love about shooting at night time, especially later on at night after 11, 12, 1, going out on a Wednesday night, is there's absolutely no one around. Now that's not tonight. Tonight is a warm night, an unseasonably warm night in Melbourne, and it's quite early. There's a lot of people around, but you need to be really careful at night which dark laneways you go down, and you do need to have eyes in the back of your head. So I love to photograph with music playing, with my headphones on, but nighttime you've got to be a bit more careful. Tip number 5, just be completely aware of your surroundings and play it safe. It can be dangerous. I've had a few close calls, but nothing ever serious. Pretty lucky here in Melbourne, but other cities wouldn't be as easy as this one. Tip number 6, I really like this one. It's really important, and that is, at night, as I said before, the light does interesting things. So for example, if you change your shutter speed and you slow a light down or you speed a light up, it might actually do completely different things. Point number 1. Point number 2, depth of field, the bokeh balls. We love those beautiful bokeh balls. Pull those lights out of focus and they look completely different. So do something with them to make them look completely different. It's amazing. Even doing a crash zoom, amazing. So at night time, the light's got all sorts of magic hidden things going on. Experiment with your camera, push all the different settings up and down and left and right, and you will find the light is doing things that you can't see with your eyes. And that's fun, that's interesting, it's creative, it's different. And the fact that we keep having new lights invented all the time means these sorts of things can happen. And that is tip number 6. White balance. It's a funny thing, but man has decided not to make all lights equal. It's a funny thing to me that lights aren't just all daylight balanced. And somewhere along the way, we've got all these different color temperatures. Fluoros are different to tungsten, which are different to LED. and on it goes. But as a night photographer, that's actually to our advantage because we get this beautiful kaleidoscope of colours. And I say, don't fight that kaleidoscope of colours. Embrace that kaleidoscope of colours. It looks really good, very colourful. And another part that I really love about it is that what we see with our eyes, the human eye tends to balance things out more, whereas the camera is more literal. And so you can photograph things and then you get back in, you're looking at your images and they can be way more red or way more yellow or way more pink than you thought they were, and that can actually be a good thing. Of course, shooting raw, you can adjust that white balance later, but that's not the point. The point I'm making is I like the differences. I embrace the differences. I enjoy the differences. Cool, huh? So, number 7, white balance. Go with the flow. Thanks so much for joining me on shooting night photography. The 7 tips that'll just help you make it easier on you. A couple of little added extras. Don't forget your shutter release cable. I think a shutter release cable is better than using the timer. The timer can, you can knock the camera, it can take longer to slow down. Just spend that $50 on a shutter release cable. And take a torch. Torches are useful. Just make sure you've got a torch. Otherwise it's hard to do things in the dark. 2 little extra tips. It's all logical, it's all obvious. Hey, we're here to help. That's what it's all about. So, thank you so much for watching. It's been great to see you again. I'd love to hear your stories, your adventures at night, things that have happened, things that have gone wrong, things that have gone right. Tell me your stories and I look forward to seeing them below. Share the gear you use and the tricks that you have to make it easier for you to shoot at night. As always, please like, please share. We love to share, makes us all smarter. Please subscribe if you haven't, and of course if you ding on that little bell, that'll remind you when my next film comes out. Alrighty, well I look forward to seeing you soon. Take it easy.